Hello and welcome back to Behindthepaddle Podcast with me, Boston Victoria. So today we are going to talk about the lovely dynamics of DDLG, the caregiver / little dynamic. We're going to talk about little boys, little girls, and mommy doms and daddy doms. We're going to talk about a whole community right now. So we're stepping into a part of BDSM where it's often whispered about, very misunderstood, fetishized, and at the same time, it can be deeply intimate. Whether you've stumbled across the acronym DDLG on FetLife, seen it on TV, or even porn, or noticed someone at a dungeon party carrying a stuffed animal, or you're secretly curious about why the words "good girl" make your knees go weak, you're in the right place. This is a world of colouring books and contracts, a world where pacifiers and punishments can sit side by side, where age regression can meet absolute safety, where bedtime rituals are kink, and sometimes, yes, even diapers, daddies, and discipline find their way into the play. So, on today's episode of Crayons, Contracts, and Care, inside the world of DDLG and caregiver / little dynamics, begins with a simple but important question. What is this really about? What are people actually doing here? What are they seeking, and why does it matter so deeply to those who live in this world? Well, first off, we're going to start with the lovely alphabet soup of acronyms that swirl around these dynamics. So we have DDLG, which stands for Daddy Dom Little Girl. We have DDLB, which stands for Daddy Dom Little Boy. We have MDLG, which is Mummy Dom Little Girl. We have MDLB, which is Mummy Dom Little Boy. And then there's CGL, Caregiver / Little, which is the umbrella term. It's gender neutral, flexible, and it covers all kinds of caregiver roles, whether the person identifies as a daddy, a mummy, an auntie, an uncle, or simply a guardian. At its core, DDLG and CGL are forms of power exchange relationships. They revolve around care, authority, nurture, structure, and often age regression. And here's something more crucial to underline. They are not inherently incestuous, not illegal, not pedophilia, and not non-consensual. These are adults negotiating roles, boundaries, and rituals that feel safe, erotic, healing, or comforting to them. When we strip away the taboo and the shock, what remains is simple. CGL is about adults choosing to enter roles of care and vulnerability together. Inside the world, language is everything, as we know this in BDSM. It's how people identify themselves and how they secure their play, and how they structure their play. So, who's in the nursery today? Let's start with littles. A little is an adult who regresses emotionally, and sometimes behaviorally, into a younger headspace. Littles may speak in baby talk, they might even be non-verbal, or they might use pacifiers, they might love colouring in books, they might wear onesies, or even diapers. But this doesn't mean they believe they are children. Rather, regression allows them to shed the burdens of adult responsibility and sink into a place of vulnerability, safety, and comfort. For some littles, this regression is non-sexual. It's about stress relief, soothing, or reclaiming a sense of safety. For others, regression can be erotic, a place where the vulnerability is sexualized and kink dynamics come alive. And for many, it's both comfort and kink existing side by side. Then there's the bigs. A big is a non regressed partner, the caregiver. They might take on the title of daddy, mummy, guardian, auntie, uncle, or simply caregiver. Their role is to provide structure, affirmation, emotional containment, and sometimes discipline. And importantly, not all bigs are dominant in the traditional BDSM sense. Some are softer, gentler, and less authoritarian that they might even not say they are a dominant. So, me personally speaking, I am a little. I have many different roles which I enjoy regressing into and subbing in. And I'm a little. I've been a little for over 10 years now. And speaking of my own personal experiences, I regress when I get stressed or depressed. I did not have a good childhood growing up, so I have a lot of trauma and a lot of PTSD. And when I regress, it gives me a safety net. Even if I'm on my own, it lets me be within myself where I know I'm safe and I can let my guard down and I can be vulnerable. And it's even better when I have that trust in somebody who is there to take care of me. Being a little and allowing somebody into your space while you are in Littlespace or when you have age regressed, that it's so incredible and it's so brave as well that you've been able to let your shields down, let that wall down, and you've found somebody that you can be so vulnerable around and you feel that it's safe and it's so beautiful. It really is. And for me, it's being a little, it's mainly non-sexual. So my ages are usually between the ages of like 3 and let's say 6. I don't wear diapers or anything like that, but I do have a bottle. I love a good bottle with milk and pacifiers and onesies and teddies and colouring books. So, yeah. You're talking to somebody who has been a little for so long, and it's honestly amazing. And we're going to go even deeper into the psychological part of age regression later on in this episode. But now we're going to go back to the titles. So we also find middles, and the role of a middle, well, middles regress not to toddlerhood, but to the preteen or teen years, usually ages 8 to 16. Middles are often bratty, sarcastic, and love to push against the rules. They do, though, crave structure, but resist authority, creating a dynamic that is less about babyhood and more about testing boundaries. And then we have the little boys, or the LBs. They're less discussed in mainstream kink communities, but increasingly visible. These are adult men who regress and crave structure, softness, and authority from a caregiver. Their existence challenges stereotypes. Littles are not exclusively femme, and caregivers are not exclusively male. I remember back in the day when Sexcetera, which was a series produced by Playboy, and it talked about so many different subjects and topics about sex and couples and kinks. I so remember, it's a core memory of mine, that one of the first episodes which I watched was about a adult baby and a little boy, and it was so amazing to see. I remember seeing that the man who had regressed had a femme caregiver, and he was suckling from the breast, he was playing with blocks, and they had a diaper on, and it was adorable. And it was such a new look on the world. And I know every now and again Channel 4 does something about BDSM and DDLG and some sort of like wow dynamic. But Sex Lecture was amazing for that because it really did show me so much. And these identities together create the language of the nursery, the shorthand that allows people to navigate who they are and what they need in a dynamic. And remember, these dynamics are not about being childish. They're about accessing the part of the self that still longs to be held, to be guided, and yes, sometimes corrected. So, the core values of the CGL relationships. Every CGL relationship looks different, but most of them rest on 4 central pillars: care, structure, regression, and sometimes eroticism. So let's start with care. At its heart, the caregiver is a protector, a nurturer, an emotional regulator. The little is the one who is safe enough to be soft, to be vulnerable, to be needy. This care often shows up through rituals like bedtime routines, reminders to drink water, rules about self care, physical comfort like holding, swaddling, or even stroking hair. It's the safety net that allows the littles to surrender. Then comes structure. Littles thrive on rules. Simple things like no sweets after 7 pm. Say please and thank you. Bedtime is at 9 pm. Structure might come through chore charts, training books, obedience rituals, or negotiated punishments. To the outside world, this might look rigid or strange, but within these dynamics, rules aren't shackles, they're scaffolding. They provide predictability in a chaotic world. So, next we have regression. Littles often regress to cope with stress, trauma, or the need for safety. And this is important. Regression is not pretending to be a child. It is stepping into an emotional state that feels younger, but is held safely within adult boundaries. One little explained it like this: regression isn't escape, it's return. It's the part of me that wasn't allowed to feel safe as a kid, finally being held. And finally, eroticism. For many, CGL dynamics are eroticized. Age play scenes can involve spanking as foreplay, diaper humiliation, or sexualized rituals and punishments. But it's always negotiated and it's always consented to. Always adult. Erotic CGL is not pedophilia. We're gonna keep hearing this, I feel like people just need to get it into their minds that it is consent and adults. It is adults using roleplay to explore taboo desires safely. The taboo only has meaning because it's being defanged by trust. And these 4 values, care, structure, regression, eroticism, form the backbone of most CGL dynamics. So, where did it come from? We're gonna now look at the history of these dynamics and the culture. So CGL didn't start on TikTok, it didn't start on Tumblr. I know, right? It's older than both of them. Psychologically, regression has been used in therapy for decades, especially in PTSD, dissociative identity disorder, and inner child work. The idea that revisiting younger emotional states can be healing is not new. So, this was actually with regression, there has been studies, there has been research, even before the 2000s. So, it was even used on veterans and people who had trauma and PTSD. And it's incredible. You should definitely go look up some of the researchers and studies. It's so interesting. So here's a breakdown of the few people who did formal studies and theorizing of regression. So of course, fucking Sigmund Freud, yeah, we love him. He's done some studies in the past, especially about women and ugh. Please go look at previous episodes. So in Freud's earlier observations, so like 1905 onwards, when a patient regressed in analysis, so for example, spoke or behaved more childlike, it often revealed hidden conflicts that couldn't surface in like adult mode. This regression gave the analyst access to the root of trauma. For example, a patient under the stress reverts to childlike speech patterns. Freud saw this not as meaningless but as a doorway to repressed memories that could be then worked through. Then we have Anna Freud's framing of it. So, like, regression can be temporary, protective, and even healthy. Children and adults regress in stressful moments to seek safety and then return to their normal functioning once they feel secure. So, for example, a sick child wanting a teddy or thumb sucking again during an illness. Anna Freud saw this as a self soothing adaptation, not pathology. So, we have Carl Jung's early take on regression. He argued that regression could be creative and healing. So, this was 1920s to 30s, not just defensive. Jung said regression can help reconnect with archetypes, childhood creativity, and deep emotional truths. So, like for example, an adult in therapy re entering a childlike state during dream work. Jung saw this as a gateway to healing and wholeness, not weakness. So, even back in the day, in the 20s and 30s, and when Sigmund Freud was alive, it was still seen as such a positive thing. So within BDSM, the daddy dom archetype appeared in the 1970s. He was a figure who combined control with nurture, a hyper controlling but deeply protective dominant. Around the same time, feminist and queer communities developed the mummy dom archetype, a material model of dominance that emphasized care alongside authority. Then came the online boom. In the 2000s, communities on FetLife and Tumblr exploded with Littlespace content. Entire subcultures formed around gear, etiquette, journals, rituals, and aesthetics. Littlespace became visible, shareable, and global. I mean, I remember Tumblr absolutely exploded. There was so much artwork, there was so much blogging, there was so much discussion about it. And I remember certain online personalities getting more popular because they were into little play or pet play and BDSM just in general. What began as a quiet kink niche grew into a culture of its own, and today there are Littlespace meetups, clothing lines, custom journals, and even households built entirely around nurture and regression. In other words, this isn't a fad, it's a culture with deep roots in psychology, BDSM history, and online community building. So now we are going to talk about why. Why does it work? Why do some people crave it so deeply while others dismiss it as strange or childish? What makes it feel so good, so safe, and for many, so addictive? We're going to talk about the psychology of the caregiver and little dynamics. We'll explore regression, attachment therapy, why brats push against boundaries, and the role of discipline and ritual. The cornerstone of most CGL dynamics is regression, the emotional softening that slipping into the younger headspace. It can be emotional, behavioral, sometimes even verbal. And here's the key point: regression isn't acting, it isn't roleplay, it isn't fake, it's real. So, what is regression psychologically? At its core, regression is a neurobiological reversion to earlier coping mechanisms. It's common in children, trauma survivors, and neurodivergent adults. It's what happens when the nerve system says, I can't hold this adult weight anymore, I need to return to safety. In the context of kink, regression is consensual. It's the deliberate surrender of the adult ego. A little doesn't believe they are a child. They simply feel like they don't have to be an adult in that moment. So, what can trigger regression? I tell you, the list is long, but it can often include soft voices, physical affection like cuddles or hair stroking, childlike rituals such as story time or pacifiers, praise or gentle scolding, or even specific clothing and environments, onesies, pastel decor, or nursery like space. So, on my Instagram and FET, I will reach out every now and again and ask for people's input in if they can add to the podcast episode, maybe from their own experiences and thoughts. So, one little put it perfectly: I don't decide to drop into Littlespace, it just happens when my daddy says, "Good girl." My chest unclenches, my body softens, and suddenly I'm colouring instead of worrying about bills. So, why does this matter? Well, because regression relies on what I like to call the safe container model. In a healthy CGL dynamic, regression is possible because the little knows they are safe. They know the rules are predictable. They know that their emotions will be contained, not dismissed. They know affection is available without conditions. In that safe container, regression isn't escape, it's return. Littles aren't pretending, they are rewiring. And for many, that's where the magic and healing begins. Now, I would like to say that for me, what can trigger regression is that if I am ultimately stressed, if I am just so overwhelmed, I want to regress so badly. I want to just be nonverbal. I want to let go of responsibilities. I just don't want to be there in a way where it's like I don't want to be my adult self. I don't want to think about the grocery shop. I don't want to think about being an adult. Being an adult is so, so hard. But on to the next topic. We're going to talk about attachment therapy and the caregiver role. So, why do caregivers matter so much in this equation? Why can a single word from a daddy or a mummy stop a panic attack? Why does a mummy's lap feel like a cathedral? The answer lies in attachment theory. Many littles had disrupted early attachments. Not all, but some. They didn't always experience consistent care as a child. CGL, when practiced with love and responsibility, offers what psychologists call earned secure attachment. That means predictable reactions, gentle correction, affection that doesn't have to be earned through performance, and consistency, the promise that even after discipline, care will still be there. Within this, we see three main archetypes of dominance in CGL. The first is the authority, the rule giver, the disciplinarian, the protector. They thrive on structure. Their control is often eroticized. The second is the nurturer. Softer, warmer, endlessly present. They soothe anxiety, ground emotions, and often provide regression space without sexual undertones. And the third is the hybrid, a blend of firm authority and gentle nurture. They use structured routines alongside deep emotional care. Hybrids are the most common in long-term DDLG relationships because they balance both sides. It's important to say dominance in CGL are not therapists, okay? I'm not one either, alright? I may feel like it at work, but I'm not one. But when it's done well, the caregiver role mimics the very things therapy tries to offer: containment, safety structure, unconditional regard. That's why littles don't just feel aroused, they feel restored. As one little said to me, some subs want to be hurt. I just want to be held until the world stops being so loud. Isn't that just the sweetest? That is just it's so soft. So, the brat subtype. Resistance is their fucking ritual. So, not every little is sugar sweet and wide eyed. Some stomp their feet, some roll their eyes, some break rules just to see if their caregiver will catch them. These assholes are brats. So, why does bratting exist? Psychologically, it's not rebellion, it's reassurance. Defiance is a way of asking, will you still love me if I push you? Will you still hold me if I resist you? Now, brats test limits not to break the bond, but to strengthen it. They want proof of structure, proof that rules matter, proof that they are still safe. The brat dynamic can include playful backtalk, deliberate forgetfulness, or cheeky disobedience. But good caregivers don't punish brats from ego. They respond with ritual, with consistency, with humor, and with love. As I often say, a brat doesn't need to be tamed. A brat needs to be seen, structured, and reassured that their resistance won't make them lose the care they crave. Now, I want to also make a very good point. There is a difference. I'm sorry if people do not like the C word, but you are not a brat if you're just a cunt. Simple as. If you're a massive wank stain, you're not a brat, you're just a wank stain. Like, you're an asshole. Okay? There is bad apples in every community, which is something I will absolutely say in every episode, where there's always bad apples. If you're a dick, you're a dick. In the previous episode, we talked about how if you didn't have consent, if you didn't talk about what you're going to do in a scene with your partner, then you're an abuser. Please go check out that episode. That would be every episode we've ever done because I feel like that is just very clear cut. That was kink versus fetish, I believe. Oh no, we did Beyond the Dungeon, exploring SSC, rack, and prick in BDSM. Yes, that was the one where I talked about abusers, and there will always be bad apples and penises very not nice penises. So, yeah, I'm just going to make that point. Just because somebody says they're a brat does not mean they are truly a brat. They could just be a cunt. Yep. So, let's move into discipline. Rules and punishments are central to many CGL relationships, but not for the reasons outsiders might think. This isn't cruelty, it's integration. Why do littles need rules? Well, because rules mimic the safety of childhood. They remove the burden of adult making decisions. They create predictability. They give the nervous system something solid to lean on. A rule isn't a leash, it's a scaffold. Punishments in CGL are negotiated. They might be timeouts, corner time, spankings, or the removal of toys. But they are always consistent, always consensual, always lovingly delivered. And the purpose of the punishment? Well, reattachment. Littles often feel guilt or anxious when they break rules. The discipline ritual allows for an emotional reset. The behavior is acknowledged, correction is delivered, and love is reaffirmed. One little described it like, Daddy spanked me for breaking a rule. I cried, but afterwards, he held me and said, You're forgiven. You're still my good girl. It didn't end with pain, it ended with reconnection. And that is such a perfect example of it. That is the heart of CGL discipline. It's not about control, it's about repair. So, rituals of affirmation, building that bond. If rules regulate, rituals reaffirm. These are the daily stitches that hold the fabric of CGL together. Rituals might include morning check ins, a text saying, Good morning, Daddy, here's my mood and outfit. Bedtime stories, read aloud in person or over the phone. Snack or meal reporting, like I drank my water. Or journaling, where littles record how they followed rules, how they feel, and what they're proud of. Caregivers can read these journals and respond with comments, encouragement, and care. These rituals aren't about surveillance, they're about connection. They remind both partners, I see you, I hold you, I care for you. So, navigating vulnerability. What are the risks of Littlespace? Littlespace is beautiful, but it's also tender, and if it's not held correctly, it can wound. Some of the most common risks include overattachment, where a little becomes overly dependent on their caregiver, jealousy, especially in poly or shared dynamics, abandonment fears if routines are disrupted, and trauma triggers, where regression reactivates old wounds instead of healing them. Signs of unsafe dynamics can include caregivers ignoring littles during or after regression, sexualizing Littlespace without consent, littles becoming unable to self-regulate outside the dynamic, or littles feeling discarded when not in headspace. CGL done right can heal. CGL done wrong can devastate. And that's why ethics matter so much. Littlespace is deliberate and voluntary, usually employed for comfort and relaxation. Just wanted to clear that up, just in case anybody was like, "What is Littlespace?" It's being in the headspace of being younger. Yeah. To be someone's daddy is to give structure to their softness. To be someone's little is to let your defenses fall asleep in someone else's hands. This dynamic is built on permission. Not just permission to play a role, but permission to regress, to need, to cry, to be bratty, to be vulnerable, to be loved without condition. And that's the psychology of CGL in a single word: permission. So now we're going to go further into the types of Littlespace. So not all Littlespace looks the same. Some of it is innocent and cozy. Some of it is erotic and taboo. Some is playful rebellion. Some is structure and obedience. So let's break it down. The four most common types of Littlespace scenes. So the first one is just pure comfort Littlespace. This is non-sexual. It's about regulation and decompression. It might involve watching cartoons, cuddling stuffies, teddy bears, bottle feeding, taking naps, or wearing pajamas. For many, it's the space where the nervous system can finally exhale. There are no punishments, no rules, no pressure, just comfort. It's not role play, it's nervous system medicine. So the second one, rule-based or protocol Littlespace. Here, structure is the kink. The little follows negotiated rituals like brushing teeth on video, reporting snacks, morning affirmations, or sharing bedtime routine. The caregiver provides gentle praise or correction. The thrill isn't the toys, it's the consistency. The rule itself becomes the container. Third, erotic Littlespace. This is where regression meets sexuality. Spankings that lead to arousal, diaper humiliation as foreplay, sucking a pacifier during oral sex, being called daddy's good girl at climax. It's controversial because of the taboos it brushes against, but for those who play here, the edge is the release. And fourth, brat correction or discipline scenes. Here, rules are broken deliberately. The little resists, stomps, or mouths off. The caregiver corrects with corner time, lectures, spankings, or toy removal. The goal isn't fear. The goal is reassurance. Correction equals care. Each of these forms of Littlespace is valid. Each has its own purpose. And for many, they overlap. Sometimes all four appear in the same relationship. There are no rules in BDSM. We've went over this. Now let's talk about rituals. The repeated acts that shape Littlespace into something lived. Diaper play. This can be comfort-based, humiliation-based, or medical in flavor. It may include diaper checks, changes, enforced wearing, or teasing. For some, it's erotic. For others, it's sacred. Being powdered, cleaned, and changed is an act of deep trust. Again, it doesn't have to be sexual. Storytime and bedtime routines. A classic. The caregiver reads a story aloud, tucks in the little, ensures pajamas are on, pacifier in, no screens allowed. Long distance couples adapt with phone calls, video chats, or voice notes. For some littles, hearing "good night, baby" from their caregiver matters more than an orgasm ever could. Yup, I'm one of those people. So, treats and rewards. Candy, cartoons, stickers, or new stuffies, positive reinforcement builds joy. A gummy worm plus daddy's proud of you becomes a dopamine ritual. And then we have timeouts and correction. When misbehavior happens, littles may sit on a rug or face the wall for a few minutes, but correction never ends there. It ends with hugs, reassurance, and a reminder, you're still my good girl, nothing has changed. That is so vital. These rituals aren't random, they're symbolic acts of trust and consistency. They turn ordinary objects, a passy, a storybook, a colouring book, into anchors of safety. So now we're going to jump into scene safety, limits, and drop. The cuter the scene, the bigger the risk. Littlespace is tender. Littles may not always be able to safe word while regressed. That's why many use non-verbal signals, dropping a stuffy, showing colour cards, making hand gestures. These become pre-organized cues when words disappear. It is very vital that this is discussed beforehand, just in case. And of course, aftercare is essential, as in any scene, whether that be normal vanilla sex. Yeah, you can go back a few episodes where we talked about aftercare. Very, very important. Little drop can include clinginess, crying, or feeling shame. A caregiver's responsibility is not just the lift off, but the landing. For some, Littlespace is a scene. For others, it's an identity. Some littles live in the headspace 24/7. They keep journals. They follow permanent rituals and dress little every day. And Littlespace is not just for women. There are little boys, non-binary littles, queer daddies, mummy doms, and caregivers of every gender. There are crossovers too. Littles who blend their identity with pet play, adult baby diaper life, or high protocol dynamics. Littlespace is as diverse as the people who inhabit it, and for many, being a little isn't just what they do, it's who they are. And I can certainly say that, absolutely. So, before we move on to another section, it's important to understand play isn't silly, play is sacred. In adulthood, joy is often taboo. Littles reclaim it. In adulthood, needing care is seen as weakness. Littles defy that by asking to be held. In adulthood, shame builds walls. Littles dismantle them through regression. For some, Littlespace is healing trauma. For others, it's about erotic taboo. But for all, it is brave. It takes courage to regress, courage to show the inner child, courage to show someone else to hold you there, courage to trust someone else to hold you there. And for caregivers, this is sacred labor, to carry someone's regression, to protect their vulnerability, to hold their storms and return them safely. That is holy work. So now we're going to talk about what happens when things go wrong. We're going to talk about little drop, abandonment anxiety, trauma triggers, caregiver burnout, and the ethics of holding such tender power. Because no matter the dynamic, no matter the role, we're all fragile in some way. So by now we've explored definitions, psychology, rituals, and play. But here's the truth. Little play doesn't always end in giggles. So just like sub drop, which was spoken about in previous episodes, little drop is real, and when it hits, it can hit hard. So causes of little drop include a sudden return to adult life, scenes that end too abruptly, caregivers going silent or inattentive, loss of rules or rituals after deep regression. And the symptoms include sadness or confusion, crying, shame, clinginess, panic texting, or trying to force regression without support. Regression floods the brain with oxytocin and dopamine. If you want to listen more about that, you should go see the episode we did about neurochemistry of the brain. A few episodes back, it's a 1 and 2-parter, but yeah. When the scene ends, those neurochemicals crash, the nervous system rebounds, and old defenses return. So, for example, after Daddy left, I sat on the floor with my stuffy and cried. I wasn't sad before, but I felt abandoned, like I'd been thrown out of Littlespace. And this isn't weakness, it's chemistry, it's psychology, and it is so, so real. To regress is to disarm, to put down adult shields and walk back into softness. That vulnerability is beautiful. But if it isn't held carefully, it feels like free falling. Inner child theory helps us understand why. Regression touches the psyche's most defenseless parts. If repair fails, if the caregiver withdraws, ignores, or ends too abruptly, the little isn't just disappointed, they're re traumatized. This is emotional whiplash. Being deeply cared for, then ignored, being punished, but not comforted, being sexualized, then left without affirmation. To a digressed little, I'm busy right now, doesn't feel like a scheduling issue. It feels like, I don't love you anymore. One mummy ended the scene abruptly because she was tired. Her little spiraled into shame. Did I disgust her? It wasn't true. But without repair, his mind replayed abandonment. What we're playing with is so fragile. Every single part needs to be perfect. To be a caregiver is not just to cuddle and scold. It is to hold psychological custody of someone's most vulnerable self. That requires ethics. There are 3 pillars of ethical caregiving. First, consent must be continuous. Littles may not be able to negotiate while regressed, so all scenes must be agreed upon in adult headspace. No surprises, added for the caregiver's gratification. Secondly, de-regression must be guided. Bring littles back gently, using grounding rituals. Remind them, you did so well, you're safe. I love that. Never drop them in the cold. Thirdly, caregivers must manage their own boundaries. Burnout leads to resentment. Caregivers need downtime, honesty, and some space to say, I can't be daddy tonight. Responsibility is not the same as 24/7 availability. One daddy ends every scene by brushing his little's hair and saying, You're back now. The ritual grounds her, prevents drop, and reminds her she was never left out. Ethics aren't optional here. They're survival. So, trauma triggers and regression rewiring. For littles with trauma, regression can be healing, or it can reopen wounds. Warning signs of trauma triggers include involuntary regression, panic during correction, excessive craving for pain or humiliation, shutting down after affection, disassociation or memory loss, or lost memory of scenes. So, safer approaches include always using grounding rituals after scenes, never punishing trauma-driven behavior, encouraging therapy alongside CGL play, using aftercare artifacts like journals, scent items, notes, or stuffies as anchors. CGL can feel like therapy, but unless you're a trained clinician, it is not therapy. It can support healing, but it cannot replace professional care. I would always recommend therapy, even if there's like just a tiny bit of trauma, or you might not think you have trauma. Go to therapy. It's amazing. So, I don't feel like I've left that much out, honestly. I feel like I've covered quite a lot of ground. So, we're going to close this hour-long episode. We're going to close the nursery. So, I feel like I've talked a lot about everything. We've talked about the punishments, the rituals, the crashes, the acronyms, all sorts. So, what's the future of CGL? Well, for littles, regression is courage. It's not weakness, remember that. It's brave to say, I deserve care. For caregivers, this is a sacred labour. It's not just rules and rituals, it's devotion, holding someone's inner child. For society, the work is advocacy, to dismantle stigma, to see regression as resilience, to build communities where this intimacy is not hidden in shame. And for the dynamic itself, the legacy is this: when built ethically, CGL creates blueprints for lives held by nurture, blueprints for futures built on devotion, blueprints where softness and structure coexist. Because crayons and contracts aren't just playthings, they're architecture. And like all architecture, they can collapse if built badly, or become cathedrals if built with love. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. I have really enjoyed doing this. It has been so good. And I hope that you've learned something, or you've just made sure you know it. But thank you so much for everybody that's listening. And if you want to support the podcast, please give a like or a review on whatever you're listening to. And yeah, you are able to become like a Patreon sponsor through Buzzsprout. It's very much appreciated to the people who do donate, and yeah, very thankful. I do this in my spare time, and I want to educate. That's like my main thing about this. And I've said it previously how there is just a lack of education, especially around BDSM in the UK mainly. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.